can see. Yeah. Are you able to see, Lindsay?
Not yet. I see you still.
See me. Okay, let me see. Oh, hang on. Okay, I think I know what I gotta do. Here we go. I gotta go share screen, share this, share, and then let me go to presenter view.
Yep. Looks
Can
good.
you see just the presenter view?
Yep. Looks great.
Okay, so we're good to go, right?
Oh, good to go.
Okay, here we go. Zoom is requesting. Okay, I'm gonna click allow. Okay, everything's still good?
Everything's good. Right on
Okay,
time.
great. Perfect. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so I'm gonna get going here. First of all, hello and welcome. If I had this webinar, my name is Kimmy Vandeweghe. I'm a registered dietitian at FoodSmart. I have my master's degree in public health and nutrition and dietetics from the University of Michigan. I'm also a certified holistic chef from the Natural Gourmet Institute in New York City. I love to cook and bake, but most importantly, I love sharing meals with friends and family. At FoodSmart, we're committed to connecting people to nutrition support, including a personal dietitian and daily tools to make eating well simple. So let's dive into our topic today, food formulas for simple everyday meals. I just wanted to see if I could. Oh, there we go. Okay. All right. So let's go to, let me see why it's not clicking. Oh, there it is. Okay. First of all, we have our giveaway, of course. So schedule a visit with a dietitian by using the promo code MEAL to be entered into a drawing for a $250 gift card. So that's all fun there. And then, Lindsay, I don't know if you have anything to add with that, but I will leave that there. And here's kind of our agenda for today, what we'll be doing, and kind of talking about what makes something a meal versus a snack. We'll talk about the food groups. We'll talk about solving the food equation, trying to get a little math theme going on here, examples of breakfast, lunch, and dinners, desserts with protein. They do exist, and we'll talk about those, and also some practical tips to make cooking at home take less time and money. So we will focus on those things. Okay, let me go to the next slide. Okay, so let's start with the food groups for how to break down our meals and snacks. The food groups have technically changed over the years, and with updated scientific research, the USDA food groups are on the left here, which is fruits, vegetables, grains, protein foods, and dairy. For this presentation, I wanted to simplify them into protein, carbs, fiber, and healthy fats. So typically we hear about counting macros. I don't know if you've heard of that, but the macronutrients. So the macronutrients are going to be protein, carbs, and fats. And I shorten carbohydrate to carbs, but I figure most of you probably got that one. However, most Americans are not reaching our fiber goals. So, an extra focus on high fiber foods, which technically falls into the carbohydrate category, is kind of necessary, I feel like, when we talk about nutrition. So, that's why we separate it into those four for this one. Now, the key is variety. So, we know including many colors when it comes to fruits and vegetables means we're getting a lot of different phytonutrients. So, adding in whole grains is a great way to add fiber. Protein is necessary since our bodies can create some proteins essential for health, but we can't create all of them. So, we do need to get some from food. Protein can come in variety of plant-based foods and also meat, dairy, and of course, sometimes like the dairy food group can be a great way to add protein, but it's also some people are lactose intolerant, so there are plenty of ways to like get those nutrients in. So meeting with a dietitian can be a great way to meet your nutrient needs. So here are a couple examples of different foods and their macronutrients and fiber content. So just to get some baseline, I'm sure we've all had some, everyone's maybe had some avocado, maybe you've had some salmon in your life, maybe quinoa, maybe not as popular, but depends on like what people have had. So just for an example here, we have an avocado which has 13 grams of carbs. It shows that we got 3 grams of protein, 22 grams of fat, 10 grams of fiber. We can move over to quinoa, just kind of compare. Okay, maybe a little bit more carbs than avocado at 39, a little bit less fiber, but still has fiber, and then the protein a little bit higher. Then we can look at something like salmon. Well, salmon's going to be what it's fish, right? So it's a meat. So there's not going to be any carb or fiber, but we do see protein and fat. So these are still considered healthy fats as they contain omega-3 fatty acids, which are unsaturated and considered heart healthy. So we'll get more into like what the fats are and what those mean, but just to get a kind of base of different foods here. So considering plant-based foods contain multiple macronutrients, we can kind of let go of thinking about food groups maybe in a really strict way, just because all these plant-based foods will contain multiple categories. So it's kind of hard to only think about them in one way or another. Maybe a little easier when you have foods like meat or fish that are they're going to be just protein and fat, but still not just all one or all the other. So things really do contain a nice mix. So that's what's great about including just a variety again. So there we go. All right, here's another slide that I kind of pulled with just some higher fiber foods that I would say. We have some split peas, some raspberries, some broccoli, just to get our bearings here for these different macronutrients plus fiber. So, thinking about adding things like split peas, which have 16 grams for 1 cup when we look at fiber and also protein, I guess, but fiber specifically. So, if our goal is hitting between 25 and 35 grams of fiber per day for adults, we are going to be a lot closer to hitting that goal if we're adding in foods like split peas or beans or legumes, because most beans and legumes are going to get us almost 15, 16 grams of fiber for just that 1 cup. Now, even if you didn't eat the full cup in one sitting, you can kind of mix it in through the day and just really get a lot higher. So, just some interesting concepts as we kind of navigate through today's presentation. So, let's get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty on what these food groups are before we start pairing together some meal options. So, we need carbs, right? There are many diets out there that are very low carb or even no carb with things like keto or something like that. So I am here to defend carbs. Carbs are our body's preferred fuel source. There are different types of carbs, and yes, carbs can also be added sugars, which we do want to keep to a minimum. We have complex carbs, and we also have simple carbs. So, complex carbs just means the chemical structure is longer. It takes our body a longer time to digest those foods. So, by slowing the breakdown of the carb, our body takes longer to release the sugar from the carb into the bloodstream. So, those are our complex. If we have a simple carb, those molecules are not very complex. They're going to be simple. Those get digested quickly and can lead to a rapid rise in blood sugar. This is why people who have diabetes need to have simple carbs on hand in case their blood sugar drops too low. They need quick energy that comes from simple carbs. So, for most of us, and obviously people who have diabetes included, we do want to have, for the most part, complex carbs in our diet to keep our insulin response in a normal range. So, when we eat carbs, insulin is released. So, we don't want our body overdoing it, right, to the point where it's overloaded and we can become resistant to that over time. So, we don't want to have like all of this sugar, right? But we want to have complex carbs so it's a slower process. And then we have those quick options if, in the case people are on medications that might get their blood sugar to be too low. Okay, so we talked about what carbs are. So, what foods contain carbs? So, we have the complex, like I was talking about, simple carbs, and then we have a separate kind of refined section. So, complex carbs are going to be your fruits and vegetables, your beans, and your whole grains, things that are kind of whole foods, right? Then, simple carbs. We have things like sugar, honey, things like fruit juice, because the fiber is removed, so it's going to instantly kind of get into the bloodstream that way. And of course, added sugars and some desserts, things like that are considered simple carbs. And then refined and processed, this section, well, might technically be considered complex based on a chemical structure. They're still going to be absorbed a lot quicker than something like a complex carb. So you're going to have things like white bread, white rice, crackers, certain types that are just going to be more made from white flour rather than wheat. Of course, there are still crackers that would be considered more of a whole grain, but in this, just for these examples, I'm just talking about the processing of the foods. So those things we just want to consider as being still a little bit more towards a simple carb. Now, you'll see that there are, I just wanted to point out because I get these questions a lot, but you'll see like honey and sugar are both listed under simple carbs. So sometimes I get asked the question as a dietitian, you know, is honey healthier? Is maple syrup healthier? Well, when it comes to like the chemical part of it, when it comes to simple and complex, honey, maple syrup, agave, those types of things are still going to be categorized in simple, right? They're still going to be easier to digest. However, some of those more natural sugars, I'll put in quotes, do contain some mineral content. So it's not to say that it's all for nothing, but they are in such small amounts that from a nutrition standpoint, they might act pretty similar to sugar, but it's really personal preference as well. And of course, honey has some potential added benefits. Some studies out there with, seasonal allergies and local honey and whatnot, but we can get into the nitty gritty. But when it comes down to when we're talking about chemistry, we're going to be more in that simple carb category. Okay, so I've talked up fiber a lot. Fiber is a complex carb. So when we talk about simple, we talk about complex. Fiber is found in complex carbs. So we think of fruits and vegetables as fiber in most circumstances, but whole grains can contain just as much. So whole wheat spaghetti, like a cup of whole wheat pasta, contains about 6 grams of fiber, and one apple contains about 5 grams. So again, we're getting pretty close there. I think in my mind too, a lot of the times I'm like, oh no, like whole grains, like they have fiber, but probably not as much as an apple, right? Well, yeah, like they really do have as much. So you can really find a lot of awesome whole grain sources to have a lot of fiber. Now, we did talk about beans and lentils having about 15 grams for 1 cup. So that is a huge number there for fiber. So we love to see it. And it also has protein. So we'd like to see that too. Now, most Americans are eating about 10 to 15 grams of fiber per day, where the needs of fiber, as I said earlier, will be 25 to 35 grams per day for adults. So we do have some work to do as a country. So we'd love to keep thinking about ways to add in fiber. And that's literally like probably one of the most important nutrition advice I can give is thinking about ways to add in fiber. Now, when we are starting with a baseline of a low fiber diet, we need to get the fiber intake up before we can really tackle any other issues that we're talking about. So, and of course, it's a case by case situation, but for the most part, adding in more fiber is going to be beneficial. So again, these foods are going to be carbs that are complex and high fiber. So we talked about raspberries briefly in the section where I listed food out. Those are going to be a high fiber fruit. Chia seeds, I want to point out too, as another one that's really awesome because 2 to 3 tablespoons of chia seeds will give you about 10 grams of fiber. So that can be a third of your fiber intake right there. And I think and we can talk about it later too, but there's recipes out there like chia seed pudding that is a real easy way to add into breakfast. Adding it into things like pancakes, chia seeds can be another thing, making jam. There are a lot of ways to like get creative with adding some of these fiber foods. Okay. Protein is what is protein? Protein is made of building blocks called amino acids. There are essential amino acids and non-essential, meaning our body can produce some amino acids on its own, but not all. So we need to get essential protein from food, the ones that our body cannot make on its own. So animal-based food products are complete protein, so that'll be our meat, fish, dairy. Now, those contain all of the essential amino acids our body cannot make. So plant-based foods are sometimes called incomplete protein since they might not contain all essential amino acids. However, if we eat a variety of plant-based foods, we can eat all essential amino acids. And things like soy products like tofu or edamame or quinoa, they do contain all of the essential amino acids. So you actually can find complete proteins in plant-based foods. You just also have to get a little more creative about eating the different types of plant-based proteins. Okay, so this is not a comprehensive list at all. This is kind of just some of the pinpoints I wanted to make with the different categories of protein. So we know the animal-based proteins contain some fat, some healthier than others. So sometimes we hear the advice about steering away from red meat or processed meat, right? Well, the reasoning behind that is typically it's higher in what's called saturated fat. Now, that's the type of fat that can be associated with higher cholesterol or higher triglycerides. Kind of if you get your blood work back and your doctor's like, oh, your cholesterol's high or something, it may be linked to something like saturated fat, which is why you hear some diets like the Mediterranean diet, which is just happens to be the most studied diet right now. Whether or not it's actually the best, time will tell. But including healthy fats is definitely shown to help. So things like tuna and salmon that have lots of omega-3s, which we'll talk more about, are great. So plant-based proteins are going to contain fiber and unsaturated fat as well, making them a great choice. So beans and lentils are both high protein and high fiber. Peanut butter, almond butter contains protein as well as many unsaturated fats. Eating them in moderation, of course, is still advised due to, peanuts and almonds and all nuts and seeds can be high calorie and do contain some saturated fats. However, nuts and seeds are recommended for both their protein and healthy fat content. So, anyway, these are just some good protein sources that we'll work with. Okay, what is dietary fat? So we talked about this a little bit already, but fat gives our bodies energy and protects our cells. We do need it, right? It's not a bad thing to eat. We need fat to form our cell membranes, to protect our organs, and for certain vitamins to be absorbed. So if you've heard of fat-soluble vitamins, those are A, D, E, and K. And we need fat sources in order for those vitamins to be absorbed. So we really do need to make sure we have. So now I separated it between the saturated and unsaturated fats. So we know the saturated fat can be linked to some more like cholesterol problems or heart disease. So we do want to be mindful of it. It doesn't mean we don't eat it at all, right? Because saturated fat will be sources of saturated fat will be things like butter or red meat or full fat dairy, which is okay to include in moderation again. We just want to think about how can we increase some of these unsaturated fats, some of these other types of foods, which we'll go over. But we have monounsaturated and polyunsaturated, which is really just a chemical term for how many double bonds are in the structure. So again, things like olive oil versus butter is a really good way to think about it with saturated and unsaturated because the butter will be solid at room temperature and that's saturated. And then the olive oil will be liquid at room temperature and that's unsaturated. So just some kind of tips there. And then unsaturated fat is found to be heart protective, meaning increasing the good HDL cholesterol, which can help remove the bad LDL. So we can go into that more, but I don't want to get too caught up in that one. So this slide is a focus on unsaturated fats. Now, it doesn't mean all these foods don't contain any saturated. Again, it's like most foods contain a combination of things. So here we're talking about what has more unsaturated fats. So it's yeah, I talked about that already. Okay. So things like nuts and seeds, things like olive oil, uh fatty fish like salmon, tuna. Again, this is not a comprehensive list. These are just some things to point out for sure. So including healthy fats will be a great thing. And it also adds a lot of flavor and helps us feel full. So there's a lot of good reasons to add healthy fats. Okay. So now getting into some of the nitty-gritty here with when we're taking some of these food groups we just learned about, all these different types of foods and the benefits that they bring, how do we kind of make those into snacks and meals? A general kind of tool, again, this is totally what works for you. This is just something I kind of thought was a good way to talk about it. But a snack is typically combining two food groups together, and we'll talk about this more on the next slide. But if you're just eating like let's say you're just eating carrot sticks or something as a snack. Well, that's pretty low calorie. So you're probably going to need something else to help keep you feel full. So adding something like hummus, which is going to be protein and have a little healthy fat, those things can really pair together well so that you can feel full and satiated and energized. So pairing things together is a great thing to do for a snack. And then for a meal, trying to get maybe three or more food groups where you're pairing more things together just to keep your energy up, to keep fullness, hunger and fullness cues can also help with how much to have, but definitely trying to have three food groups together. So let me show you some of those things. Okay, so here are some options with fiber and protein. So on the left-hand side, you're going to see fiber foods starting with carrots, and on the right side, you're going to see protein foods starting with hummus. So when eating a snack, we want to mix food groups to create lasting energy and a feeling of fullness. So like I said, carrots on their own, it's not a bad thing to eat. It's just if you want to be mindful about, making sure you have energy and wanting a snack that's going to be more nutrient dense. And also, if you're someone who's working on increasing their protein, it's really helpful to think about where can we add fiber and protein together to make more of a complete snack. So these types of foods will really help with that as well. So we've got apple slices and peanut butter. We've got whole grain crackers and cheese slices, maybe some berries and cottage cheese, some tuna, oatmeal. Well, not that together, but you know what I mean. You can kind of go through the list and pick like which ones would go well together, but I kind of tried to do it on an even keel there. And then tortilla chips and maybe some black bean dip. So these are all things where we're just thinking, okay, what are some foods that contain fiber or whole grains, and what can we add protein wise to increase the nutrition of that snack? Okay. So another snack idea could be healthy fats and carbs. So on the left, I have healthy fats, and on the right, I have carbs. So we've all heard about avocado toast, but avocado is a nice healthy fat, and toast, the bread, whole wheat bread, that could be a nice carb or whole grain. So, including those things together will create more lasting energy than if you were to just have a piece of bread on its own. So, trying to think about what are we pairing together? Or maybe you're like, oh, I want some crackers. I want to snack on crackers. Okay, crackers aren't a bad choice to have as a snack. But what would increase the nutrition of those crackers? Maybe spreading some peanut butter on it for that added protein and healthy fat, that's going to create more of a full snack rather than just feeling like, ooh, maybe I'm still hungry, 10, 20 minutes after just having crackers. But if I add that peanut butter, you know what? I'm feeling a little more energized and I might not need something for another hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on how many you have, that kind of thing. So, okay, here's some of the fun part. So, when we're creating meals, now we're thinking about, okay, where's the protein, where's the fiber, but maybe we can increase and add also make sure we have healthy fats and carbs. So something like avocado toast is a great snack, but something like avocado toast and adding some eggs, well, that's adding protein. That can be more of a meal. Now, in this picture, it's just one slice, right? So that may or may not be enough food for you. It just depends on how many meals and how many snacks you have throughout the day. So maybe one piece could be enough for some person, and then maybe 2 to 3 pieces of something like this would be a meal for somebody else, depending on your activity level, whether or not you're an athlete, whether or not you have certain medical conditions we're working through. So just kind of figuring that out. But that's another thing that we can help you with. So let's see. And then also something like a tuna salad wrap, we're adding tuna, we're adding some veggies, we're adding a whole grain tortilla. This doesn't mean you can't also add some avocado. You can also add a little bit of mayonnaise. Now, I'm typically look for the ones that are lower saturated fat, like we talked about. So maybe some olive oil mayonnaise or avocado oil or something that's made with a little more unsaturated fat if you do choose to do that. Or you can always add something like an avocado and kind of mash that in with tuna and some veggies and kind of use the fat from avocado as your source of fat there too. So the fajitas are a nice example of maybe a plant-based option. So we've got, beans and rice and peppers. So from the standpoint of a complete protein, if we pair beans and rice together, that's a complete protein right there. Not that we have to eat it in the same meal. Let's say we had beans for lunch and rice for dinner. Well, that's still going to include all of those amino acids that we need. But, might as well, I guess, have it at the same meal since they go well together anyways. Salmon bowls and grain bowls are some favorites of mine, and I think they're really nice and easy to put together too, where you can think about for a salmon bowl using salmon as the protein, and then thinking about ways to add in fiber, add in protein, maybe more protein. Edamame has some protein, but also fiber, and then avocado with some healthy fats, and then rice for some carbs. So then I know we talked more about in the carb section with like refined grains versus whole grains. Well, in this case, with the rice, with the salmon bowl, we're getting fiber from the avocado. We're getting fiber from the edamame. We're getting protein from the salmon and the edamame. So the rice here is less important on making it brown rice. We can do, if you prefer white rice, if you prefer brown, go for it. But if you prefer white rice, you're not like missing too much because you're already including fiber in all of these other ways. So it's just talking about being like inclusive to all of our food groups, right? Like we can get to play around with it a little bit when we know what foods have fiber. We can be less picky on each food having everything because sometimes we might have other preferences and sometimes there might be certain recipes passed down from generations that might have white rice and just so we're not thinking, oh well, we have to switch that to brown, because if we know all the foods that have fiber, we can add more fiber in other ways. So just wanted to pinpoint that one. Okay. And then a grain bowl is another fun one. I like doing a quinoa. I mean, just has a lot of protein in it. Chickpeas, lots of fiber, also protein. And maybe some veggies like cucumber, tomato, maybe a tahini sauce. I don't know if you guys have done that with it's like a crushed sesame seed butter for those who don't know tahini. Kind of looks like peanut butter, can be a little bit more runny, and that can be a nice sauce to some of these grain bowls. So I think that's a really nice one too. All right. And just as I was talking about with the different types of like how many slices of avocado toast to eat, well, if you're not sure what works for you or you have certain goals, meeting with a dietitian can be a great way to talk through what works for you when it comes to some of these meals and snacks and how much of it to eat. Of course, I'm a big fan of intuitive eating and mindful eating, where we're really listening to our bodies and we're really like in tune when we feel hungry, when we feel full. These things can be really important. But if you're like, oh, I can't tell when I'm hungry. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm distracted. I wait all day and then I'm starving, or sometimes I feel like I overeat. Those working with a dietitian can be a great way to kind of regain your own ability to listen to your body and what that looks like for you. So definitely make an appointment with FoodSmart if you haven't already. And then this is just a little graphic that is another kind of nice way to just think about meal building. So thinking about loading, and maybe you've heard this before, maybe not, but kind of looking at it from a plate, half of the plate, or if it's a bowl, it can be a bowl too. Just trying to get half of it loaded up with these non-starchy vegetables, things that might be higher fiber, right? And then a fourth of the plate being a lean protein source. Maybe it's a salmon here, maybe it's chicken, maybe it's tofu, maybe it's beans. And then the other quarter of the plate being whole grain. So again, thinking about higher fiber grains. But again, we know we can add and pick and choose a little bit here since we've learned a little bit more about all of the different types of foods and what they contain. And then also including fruit. Fruit is another easy way to add in fiber. So sometimes if people are like, you know what, I'm not a huge fan of beans, don't really love it, not a huge fan of certain vegetables even. Well, okay, if you like fruit, let's talk about fruit and how we can include more of that. Because as we know, a cup of raspberries contain 8 grams of fiber. That's awesome. Can we get more of that? Can we get some apples? Can we get some oranges? And think about how we can add in fruits to some of these things as we slowly make these changes to increasing fiber in your diet. Okay, I could probably do a whole presentation on this slide. So I'm a big fan of still having desserts, right? Still having some sweets, I think is really, really helpful. So it's just fun also too. I think it's fun. I think it's fun to make healthy desserts. So When we talk about desserts in this slide, I'm going to mainly focus on using like peanut butter, almond butter, some kind of nut and seed butter, because that's a really good, healthy fat that's going to have a lot of unsaturated fat, but we can put that into a dessert recipe. So the picture that I use, this is my photo I made, so don't come at me if it looks bad. But so I took these medjool dates, so they're really big dates. You take the pit out, you can fill it with some crunchy peanut butter, and then you kind of like close it up and put it in the freezer so then until they're hard. Then you dip those in melted chocolate, and you can put a little crushed peanuts and sea salt on top, and that's what the picture shows there with some parchment paper. And I put it back in the freezer to harden up, and then you can store it in the fridge. So those are real, and you really just one sometimes does the trick. Of course, if you want to go for more, that's okay because they also have a lot of fiber. Dates have fiber, the peanut butter has protein and healthy fats. And yes, of course, there's still going to be some sugar in the chocolate, depending on what chocolate you use. But again, we're talking about so much less than what we might find in, a real Snickers bar or candy bar. So you're really kind of amping up that healthy fat and protein with the nut butters. So let's see what I missed because I wrote a couple notes here too. Okay, so blood sugar balance. So if we're including uh protein and healthy fats in something like peanut butter or nut butter, uh that's going to help balance the blood sugar. So sometimes if we're just eating these like really sweet treat candies, our blood sugar can kind of spike up. But if we eat them with foods with protein and healthy fat, we don't notice that same spike. It'll be a little bit more slow, help balance that blood sugar where our insulin doesn't have to be like, up and down, up and down. So that's why these kinds of desserts can be helpful and healthy. It's not saying all of these are going to be low calorie necessarily, but they're going to be blood sugar balancing and they're going to have fiber. So you might not find yourself eating as much of these things. But again, it does take that intuitive eater to think about, okay, let me just start with one or two of these and let me wait a little bit and see if that gets the craving. If I'm hungry, I'll get more, but kind of being in tune with that. So you can also make things like energy bites, which you can do peanut butter and rolled oats. Kind of mix those together, add in some chocolate chips and maybe a little bit of honey to bind them together. You can make those types of desserts that have a lot of fiber in it and a lot of protein. Adding, well, yeah, I talked about that already. Okay. Oh, and then the one other thing I wanted to talk about were smoothies. So especially with the warmer weather, I don't know where everybody lives, but here in Michigan, we have a pretty day to day, although tomorrow's gonna be like 42. So we won't count on this staying anytime soon. But a nice smoothie can kind of be reminiscent of like a milkshake if you throw in some frozen bananas, some peanut butter, some cocoa powder, and a milk, whatever milk you like, to kind of blend that together. And then you kind of have like this chocolate peanut butter like milkshake, but we're also gonna have protein from the peanut butter. We're going to have fiber from the banana, also a little fiber from the peanut butter, healthy fats. And depending on what milk you use, and if you have access to protein powder or something like that, you can also increase the protein content of that smoothie. And then there you go as a really nice, healthier kind of dessert option. So there's a lot more I can talk about on this, but I'll kind of leave it at that. But just to know that there are ways you can still, if you are a baker, if you like to make desserts, there are ways that you can include healthy fats in your desserts, and then just kind of being mindful about portions if you're on a weight loss journey or something like that. But if you're just depending on what you need too, these can be really nice little energy boosts if you are an athlete or something too, where you wanna recover with some protein and carb content. Something like these little dessert bites could be that. Okay. So I'll run through a couple more slides before we'll have questions, but I can see the chat has a lot of stuff going on too, so maybe you already have questions. But these are just some practical tips to make cooking at home take less time and money. So, have staple ingredients on hand. So, with some of these recipes we're talking about with food groups, I kind of separate into food groups again here. I put the carbs and fiber together. But having some of these staples can be helpful to just throw meals together when you need them, and also taking advantage of buying bulk items. So, things like rice, pasta, oats, some whole grain bread or tortillas that can also be stored how much you get. I like a frozen whole wheat waffle is really nice. Throw some peanut butter on that and make a little and maple syrup, and then you have some breakfast. Frozen veggies, frozen fruit, canned, just having different options if fresh isn't always available. So I like Italian food, so having pasta I think is always great where you can add frozen veggies, add a protein, and then you have more of a complete meal. So some protein options we have are going to be beans, canned tuna or salmon, some milk, yogurt, cottage cheese, and some healthy fats we can have on hand might be olive oil or peanut butter. So just thinking about it from the food groups and what you can have on hand, what you might be able to buy in bulk to just store so that you're ready to go. Okay. Budgeting basics. So I'm sure everyone's heard like don't go to the grocery store hungry, but making a list, having a plan so you're not just buying every single thing that looks good can be helpful. Store brand things, I'm sure that you've talked about that before, but and then utilizing the storage. So I think a lot of times people will buy fruit sometimes or buy bananas and then they go bad and you just toss it. So trying to remember that even if a banana goes bad, or even if it's brown, you can still peel them, throw them in a baggie, and throw them in the freezer, and then you're able to use those bananas for smoothies, or you can even pull them out and thaw them for banana bread, or unless you want to make banana bread right away. But I know not everyone has time for that. So stuff like that can be really helpful. And then also comparing unit prices. Sometimes they'll have it on the tag unit prices so you can kind of see just because something's cheaper doesn't mean it actually is if it's not the same amount. So just double checking it is would be helpful. And then in season foods, this is a little graphic here, but just looking at different months, and this is a more general one. So definitely look into like your state and what is local and what might be more affordable based on just what's in season. So March, we got parsnips, kale, April, asparagus, rhubarb, leeks, peas. Just kind of thinking about, okay, maybe I'll look for some things in season. Maybe it might be a little bit better um, of a deal, potentially. Something to look for. Okay. Batch cooking and meal prepping. So, the difference between meal prepping and batch cooking seems to be a bit debated online, but my understanding has always been meal prep involved containers of prepped meals for the week. Batch cooking, on the other hand, is prepping a large batch of one thing, like a large batch of quinoa and putting it in one container, then preparing a large batch of roasted veggies in a separate container. So both styles of preparation can be helpful, but batch cooking does offer more flexibility to make different meals using similar ingredients. One day you might make a roasted veggie wrap, you add quinoa, you add hummus. Another day you might make a grain bowl, and then you're grabbing just different types of ingredients that way. If you meal prep everything as a wrap or a grain bowl individually, it might be easier to grab and go. That might work for you, but you might not feel like eating the same thing for multiple days. That also is true for some people I work with. So just knowing what works for you is going to be best. So think about what might work. And then either way, prepping food at home can reduce the amount of times we might eat out, which can save us money. Batch cooking might also save some people money since you can repurpose ingredients. If you aren't going to do the full meal prep, if you aren't going to eat all of the meals you meal prepped, well, that can result in food waste, which definitely, you know, doesn't help us with saving money. So it's also easier to freeze items when you're batch cooking. So if you have a big batch of quinoa and you don't think you're going to make it through all of that, throwing some of that in a baggie and putting it in the freezer, you can pull that back out and add it to soup. You can pull out frozen greens like spinach if it's about to go bad. If you throw that in the freezer, you can pull that out if you're making soup and just throw it right in there to really amp up a soup recipe. Or you can use it in other ways too. I just think that that's kind of an easier way to do it. Okay, my last little plug here is work with a dietitian. So we can help you assess and formulate your goals, consider your unique health history, preferences, and make a personalized plan to meet your goals. And then we can also discuss personal, yeah, struggles and things that you might need motivation for, might need accountability. And so we can help keep you on track for that. Okay, I know I ran through a lot of those at the end, but okay, I'm gonna pull up the questions. If you have any more questions, feel free to throw them in the chat, but I can see it. So let's see here. We've got I'm not sure if the PowerPoint we shared, I can ask Lindsay about that. Let's see. Oh, yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. She already answered that. Thank you, Lindsay. And yes, it'll be recorded. Let's see. Is this about eating healthy? Well, kind of, yes. And awesome. Thank you for all your comments. Let's see. Yes, perfect. I love reading these. Okay, yeah. I should have read some of these during it. Okay. Yeah, the Snickers dates are so good. And I can share some let me see if I have some of those recipe links too. But there's so many recipes online that you can find and of course on the Food Smart website as well. Okay, if you're not a chocolate fan, what else could you dip the dates in? Well, that's an interesting question. I would say, I mean, I don't know if you're like a white chocolate fan, if that counts, or if anyone else has ideas to think about, just little coating, like almost like a candy coating. Because even if it has a little bit more added sugar, I'm not like so concerned because it's a small amount. So trying to think about other candy type of coatings that you might like. But I know some of those do still contain chocolate, so I got to think about that one. Um, Oh yes, what am I buying for chocolate? Yes, I do chocolate chips. You can break up big bars of chocolate and I'm always a fan, of course, dark chocolate, it does have a little bit more antioxidants, but since again it is a smaller amount, it doesn't I would say whatever your preferences are because if you're going to be making like a chocolate covered date, you are going to be eating a lot of fiber and healthy fats and other things. So I'm less concerned about specifics, but whatever is affordable too. Like if their milk chocolate ones are cheaper, that's fine. Oh yeah, someone wrote butterscotch chips. That's a really good idea. I really like that. Butterscotch chips. Okay, cacao versus cocoa. Yeah, so it's like a bit of a processing difference. So you can get more of this like raw cacao that I think, yeah, it's higher in antioxidants, but um I'm trying to think. That's more used in like a smoothie situation. Raw chocolate, yeah, is pretty bitter. So I'd say if you're using cacao powder in a smoothie and you're also maybe adding other things like the banana to sweeten, that would make it not so bitter. So that's good. Okay, yeah, smoothies, cool. Yeah, cocoa powder, cacao. Hopefully I answered that one. And then oh, yogurt. Yeah. Oh, yes, yogurt. Okay. I think that's a great way. There are different types of yogurt you could coat something into. There's a whole thing on like frozen yogurt bark right now. I haven't gotten on that train yet, but I definitely, if you want to look it up, you can spread yogurt, add some chocolate, add some fruit, put it in the freezer, and you kind of break it into bark. So that's like a high protein one option too. Um, Green smoothies, I could talk about that for a while. Typically you can add spinach without frozen spinach to a smoothie without really tasting it. Sometimes the color is going to be affected. So if you use fruit like bananas or mangoes and you add something green, it will pop green. If you add like raspberries or blueberries and then you add spinach, it will be brown. So if you are a visual person and you're like, that's weird, then I won't recommend that. And so stick to the fruit that'll look pretty. But I don't know. Sometimes if you're putting it in a closed container anyway and you're just drinking it, it still tastes amazing. It's just the color has thrown people off before, so I don't want you to feel that way. You can also do frozen cauliflower. People have done that. Frozen zucchini. I mean, there are all sorts of things you can do, but I want to make sure you're also adding some fruit, maybe some protein to really help because you also don't want it to just taste like a frozen zucchini puree. You want it to taste good. So play around with like how much you add and just like little bits maybe to start. Um, Fatty fish. Okay, there are other ones like mackerel is really good, and oh gosh, sardines, if you're a fan, anchovies are really good fatty fish. I don't always lead with those because usually they're quite polarizing. So if you like those fatty fish, by all means, absolutely. I really do want to buy some sardines to see what I think. But if you search online to just high omega-3 fish, those should come up. And yes, Carolyn mentioned about some different types of chocolate that might be they're a little bit lower sugar, a little bit higher antioxidants. If that's affordable for you, absolutely. Okay, frozen pancakes. Yes, that's a great one. Let's see, chocolate. Oh yes, chocolate alternatives. Freezing quinoa, beans and lentils. Yes, I think it's more of a square rectangle situation. What's the difference between beans and lentils? So it's the like legume category. I think it's like all beans are legumes, not all legumes are beans, something like that. But I guess the variety is still best. I'm not really sure the specific like culinary definition now that I'm thinking about it between them, but both of them will be high in protein and high in fiber. So we can get more into that for sure. But that legume category is the main thing to do. So, okay, cool. Stuffed dates. And then let's see, other types of food for desserts. Let's see. Thank you, thank you. Oh, crushed pistachios on avocado toast. I love that. What about cookies? Yeah, so cookies, I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what part that was at, but yeah, cookies, looking for ones with fiber for sure if you're able to, or lower sugar options. Cookies can obviously to be a little bit more high in like refined carbs and sugar, but there are still options. And a peanut butter cookie, if you're using peanut butter as a base, can also increase the fat. Using something like almond flour, if that's available to you, could be really good. Um, and yeah, we can talk more about that. Okay, I'm just trying to wrap up a couple more questions. I know we're at time, so if you have to go, thank you so, so much for coming. Okay, did I address stevia and sugar substitutes? No, I don't think I went over that, but stevia, monk fruit, those things can be a really great thing to add if you're trying to work on lower sugar. And it will be recorded. And let's see, definitely reach out to our support number if you do work with Food Smart already and you're having questions. We can definitely get into that. And granola bars. Granola bars can be really great. The tricky part about those is just double checking the sugar. Some of them are super high. So if you want to make them at home, you can kind of control it a little bit more or look for options with higher fiber and maybe some protein. Because granola bars can be really great. They can have a lot of fiber. But if you're not careful, some of them are just loaded with sugar. So just making sure we're kind of balancing that. If it is high sugar, let's add protein and let's add fiber because that's going to slow down our blood sugar response rather than that spike. Okay, hopefully that helps. Thank you all so, so much for your questions. These were amazing. I'm sorry if I didn't answer everything fully, but please let me know or we can talk further. Reach out to Food Smart or find us. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as well with Food Smart. So thank you so, so much, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Kimmy. That was fantastic. And thanks, everyone, for bearing with us through the technical difficulties. I'm glad those of you who could joined. We will send out the recording of the webinar via email, so keep a lookout for that. And we'll be back next month with another topic. So thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Bye-bye.